Welcome to Cash Flow Savannah, episode 29. Today, our guest is Alex Chiappetta. Chandler, how many times did your head explode when we were talking to Alex?
Yeah, no, it totally surprised me. We were talking to him a little bit before, and he's kind of just giving us the gist, and we were like, "Just stop talking. We'll talk to you about it more." And then he kind of deep dove, and we were like, "Wow!" Um, really just impressed with how quick he takes action.
Yeah, very quick. I wanted Alex to come on because I know we have a lot of people that are military and they use VA loans, and I know he's great at it. But that was probably a tenth of what he talked about. He's amazing at financing, he's amazing at construction and estimating construction. And I know anyone that listens to this podcast is going to really get a lot out of it.
Yeah, they will get a ton out of it, and if you can, I'd reach out to him and ask him even more questions because he really does want to help other people out too.
Yeah, Alex is very sincere. I met him for the first time at our November meetup. We had a meetup about goal setting, and I was like really impressed. He spoke several times. We try to keep it very interactive. And I said, this guy's really smart. And I made a beeline for Alex right after the meetup, and I said, please come on our podcast. I want to learn about you, and I feel like you have a lot to share. And boy, was I correct on that. So I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back that I saw him first, but
Yeah, you did. He
fantastic.
came up and introduced himself to me, and I think I just had a few other people kind of talking. He was kind of in there, so I didn't really get to
Yeah.
learn too much about him, but I sure did today.
Yeah, he's so fantastic. So without delay, we're going to bring in Alex Chiappetta. Welcome to Cashflow Savannah. Alex, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
We are good.
I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Chandler and I really enjoyed meeting you at our last in-person meetup. Thank you so much for coming. Just for our audience, just give us a little background about who you are, where you come from, how you got into real estate, just background info.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I'm originally from Minnesota. I grew up in a small town out there. We had a little farm, so I kind of started learning construction a little bit that way. From there, I went to college in Montana, went to Montana State. That's kind of where I first got my introduction to real estate without even realizing it, that I was in a fraternity and I was always involved with the house, of fixing up parts of the house and whatnot. And I had a buddy who had read just a classic Rich Dad Poor Dad. He gave me that book and I read that, and it kind of started sparking the interest, but I never really did anything with it at that time. And so I finished my degree in industrial engineering, moved to Austin, Texas, and did process improvement work at Hewlett Packard. So started getting into kind of Lean Six Sigma and improving processes. Went to another company in Austin, and then sometime in there, I got laid off from that job. And I had met an alumni through my fraternity who was into flipping houses in Denver. And I called him and he said, "Yep, come up here, come work with me. I'll show you the ropes." And so for about 2.5 years, I worked with him flipping houses in all over Metro Denver, from Colorado Springs all the way up to Loveland and Fort Collins area. We did probably 30 flips while I was there, and my main job was the project manager. So we went from one or two flips at a time up to about six flips at a time. And so a lot of what I was able to kind of bring to the table was he was really good at running them, but it wasn't as systematized. And so then my systematizing background was kind of putting things into strategic systems of how we run everything, making SOPs, and then really kind of evolving those systems. And so that's kind of what got me into it. And then when me and him kind of finally parted ways, I was finally actually making enough money to buy my own house. So I bought my first kind of house hack that I got into, that I bought like a main house with an ADU. And that kind of worked out well because I could pretty much live for free. I had that house the whole time, and then I ended up joining the military. My whole time in training, that kind of house, that cash flow was kind of keep me alive with my low military salary at the time, until I got stationed here in Savannah, Georgia, when I started buying more properties here. And now I've mostly just been doing buy and hold, a little bit of flipping where I can, but mostly like more like burr strategies, just trying to really hold everything as far as I can.
Sweet. So let's go back to your first property. You said you had saved up some money. How did you finance that deal?
That was a conventional deal. I did 5% down and I had my real estate license. So what ended up happening was I used my 2.8% commission towards the down payment. And then I think I also negotiated a seller concession for like 10 grand over the roof or furnace or something. And so I ended up on like a $500,000 house. I think I ended up having to put like $13,000 down on it. Um,
Really?
and I was also like a 2.75% interest rate. And so that one's kind of been between the main house being rented and the ADU, that one's kind of been my cash cow house that somehow I don't know how in the middle of a really hot Denver market, I got a little bit under asking. I think people just didn't understand with the pictures that it had a separate ADU, but having walked through enough houses, I saw it right away. And I remember I saw the house. I called the guy on the way there to look at it. I already knew I was going to put an offer in. On my way home, I was like, yep, I'm going to put an offer in. Here's the price. I sent him over the offer that day. I was like, hey, look, I have an investor background. I'm not going to mess around with you. Like, I'm going to do inspection for main things, no major systems, anything, health and safety. Other than that, I'm not going to nickel and dime you. Let's make this a good transaction. He accepted the offer, and we kind of took it from there.
Okay, sweet. So what year was this? Was this before kind of everything started shooting up, or was this kind of in the middle of that?
No, this was during COVID. This was 2020, like June of 2020.
So almost there. Yeah, no, I wish I could have bought a house then. I think everybody says that nowadays. But
And that's how I feel about living in Austin. I lived in Austin in 2014, 15, 16. I was like, man, if I would have bought a house then, it would be like triple the price now.
oh yeah. So I want to ask, the ADU in the back, did you just long-term rent that or Airbnb?
I started Airbnb it a little bit, and then I ended up kind of falling into a long-term situation where they're going to pay me a good amount. And so I've kind of gone back and forth. It was on long-term, and then especially when I was initially going to the military because I knew I was going to be really busy. And then I had a friend who ran Airbnbs, and when I bought it, the guy actually just left it all furnished because he had been Airbnbing it. So I had everything I needed. So then I had a friend running the Airbnb for me for a while, did that for probably another year and some, was doing pretty well with it. And then I just had a couple bad clients in a row that I just kind of was sick of it. And so I ended up master leasing it to a girl who's trying to do Airbnb arbitrage.
Good.
Excuse me. So I was kind of trying to help her out and be like, hey, I'll give you a reasonable rate on it. It's already furnished. You manage it and you can take the spread on it. And so it got her going. So I think it's been going pretty well for her. We're just on a 1-year lease for that. And the main house, I've had 2 back-to-back 2-year leases on them, which has been pretty nice. That's like the stable income. And then the Airbnb either hits out of the park in the summer or does okay in the winter, but it still nets out doing pretty well when I did it. And as a long term, it does pretty well as well.
Sweet.
What year was it that you bought your original property? And then what year was it when you came to Savannah and started investing here?
I bought that one in June 2020, and I got here February of this year. So
Okay.
I was in San Antonio in that time in between in training for the military.
So you're just getting into the Savannah market. That was
Yeah.
I was wondering how long you'd been investing here. Interesting. Wow.
Less than a year.
It's a year. I mean, we're in December for our listener. We're in December of 2023 right now, and you just got here 11 months ago or 12 months ago, basically. Is that right? Wow.
Yeah.
You're amazing. Awesome.
Hit the ground running.
So I want to ask, from flipping properties to buying holds, is that a similar process, or is that totally different for you?
It's a lot less work for the buy and holds. I'll say that.
Oh yeah. So as far as the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the same. It's just numbers.
Yeah.
I think right now where the holds kind of get interesting is just the cash flow of the holds, especially with rates going up. That when you can flip something, you're not as worried about what the interest rate's going to be on the backside and the payment's going to be. You're just looking at that spread of how much you can up the value of the home. Whereas when you're holding, you're trying to figure out how you build in some equity for yourself if you can. But then I'm always tend to look at this point in life at cash flow. Yes, I'd love to build long-term equity, which would be great in the long term. But right now I'm saying, how can I replace my current income to give me flexibility? So I've mostly been focused on cash flow at this moment.
Okay.
This other house I bought ended up being more of a burr where I did a flip. I was going to flip it. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep this one and live in it because it's perfect for me and it's cheap to rent out or to live in. So they're very similar processes. It just goes a little bit quicker doing the buy and holds as long as the number works.
Okay. That makes sense.
Are there any specific, what part of town do you like to invest in, Alex? What's your favorite? Like
Say that again.
I like the South Side personally as an investor. I also like the West Side, but I just wondered if there was a area of town that you really like.
Honestly, most of it's kind of been more happenstance because when I bought my first house here, I didn't really know Savannah at all. And I was literally just looking at maps and I found a house, a house with an ADU that's in Midtown, kind of on the west side of Bull. So more the up and coming side of Bull. And when I looked at the map, I was like, oh, Ardsley Park's right here. It's supposed to be a really nice neighborhood. There's Habersham Village. So I just kind of looked at what was around it. And that's how I ended up getting to this house. So my first time seeing my first house I bought was a day before closing. Like literally I got to Savannah and drove directly to that house and looked at it and then signed the paperwork the next day for it.
You already had it under contract before you got here?
Yeah. Yeah, I was in the middle of training and I like got a call from an agent I knew that's like, hey, you should check this house out. And I looked online and I was like, yep, put an offer in on it. Um,
You're amazing, Alex. I knew it when I met you, and I'm really impressed. Like that's awesome. Good for you. Well, and I
it was
want
a
to
little
say
more risk than I need to take, but it worked out.
it worked. And I've had a lot of people, I work with a lot of out-of-state clients, and they always ask me, well, where do I invest? And I'm like, well, the whole town's going up. And I'm like, I always tell them, you tell me I'm crazy, but I always say, well, if that's dictated by your budget, to be honest, because if you have a low budget, I'll tell you where you won't be investing. So to me, the budget kind of dictates it. But with that, would you say that's what kind of helped you find that property, or how did you, zone in on that from out of state?
It literally just came out of the numbers because it had the ADU. I did the same thing I'd done before where I said, all right, if I buy a 3 bed, 2 bath house and I rent it out, I'm probably going to maybe bring in like 2,300 for it. And my mortgage will be around 2,300. So I'm going to break even. But if I spend a little bit more and I can find with an ADU, that's going to bring me an extra, say, $1,200 a month, which all of a sudden makes it so I'm making $1,000 a month off of cash flowing. Or if I'm living in it, I can at least get half my mortgage covered and still have my own space. So that's kind of always been my strategy, kind of just being more crafty as I'm getting into this of how can I put the minimum amount of cash down and find ways to still have my own space, but make cash flow from the property. And that's mostly end up being in ADU type properties where someone's in my backyard and yeah, I guess I'm in my backyard, but I still have my own space and I'm happy with it.
So the next property that you've got in Savannah, is that a VA loan property or?
Yep, that was my first VA one. So I did that one with 0% down because your first time using the VA, 0% down works pretty well. Bought that one, like I said, kind of sight unseen. Saw it a day before closing, bought it and moved into it. I had a couple buddies live with me as they were looking at buying houses throughout. And then I initially started Airbnb-ing the ADU. I kind of fixed it up and Airbnb'd it. I rode that for about 6 months until the city gave me a slap on the wrist and they said, don't do that anymore. And so I had to stop and go to long term. But when it was running pretty good. I was covering all my expenses and more off this little 400 square foot ADU.
So at one point, which was a very joyous point in 2023 for you, you were renting out your main house by the bedroom. So you were making really nice cash flow there, and you were short-term renting illegally the back unit. So yeah, you probably slayed the first 5, 6 months of 2023.
It helped cover all the costs for like I think what happens I netted out like all my expenses I put in and just setting up a house. Every time you move, you just end up spending like 10 grand just buying furniture and drapes
Yeah.
and everything. And so it ended up making all that a wash. And it was just another good experience. Just learned a lot from doing it and how to figure out. I learned I just again I really do not like design stuff. Like it like stresses me out. Like figuring out how to move walls, how to lay a house out, easy, love it. When it gets to like what tile should I put here and what color should I paint the walls, I hate that.
Alex, that is who, not how. If I
Yeah.
always say if something feels heavy, you got to hand it to someone else. You need to only do what feels light. You're right. Then find someone else to do it. There's so many people that really enjoy that stuff. I mean, that's funny.
Totally.
I love it.
So that's your second property, right?
Yep.
You
And you're
still live
still in
in
that one.
Colorado, and now, right?
I was in that one, and then what ended up happening was the house across the street. I got to know the neighbor. She was getting a little bit older, wanted to sell it, and I bought it. It was a little 2 bed, 1 bath, and so I bought that one. I used hard money to buy it, fixed it up. Kind of went in jointly with the family member. They gave me some money for the rehab. And the owner, I got to know her pretty well, and she had some other properties she had sold off. And so when we were signing the paperwork for it, she like saw my interest rate, my hard money, and she's like, "I don't like you paying that much in interest." She's like, we can figure something out. And so they ended up seller financing the house back to me. Like I was able to wrap everything into it and put it on a seller finance note.
Closing table. You just did all this at
Uh,
the table.
at the first closing table, I closed with hard money originally, but like a month later, I put on the seller finance. I'd already put most of the work money into it. And then we kind of repackaged it all together and put on a seller financing deal. And so then she fronted the money, paid off my other loan, and now I'm on a loan with her. And so it was a very like just because I built a really good relationship and she was just an awesome lady. And so she helped me out with it. And so when I moved into this one, it's a little 2 bed, 1 bath because I rent the other house for more.
I got to clarify this deal really quick, Alex. I'm sorry to interrupt you. So I'm just going to make up numbers. Okay. So you paid her, you handed her 100,000, arguably whatever, in cash. And then she handed you back a month later, 120.
Yes, essentially.
I hate you. And Chandler also hates you. And our listeners also hate you. Like, really? Like, I've never heard of that in my entire life. Like, you're amazing. Okay. Sorry. I just
I,
had
I
to
don't think it's
clarify.
that.
So, like, did he just say she financed the rehab and the house back to him?
But I think it's just how you frame it to them. Because one, I built a good relationship with her. Like I would go stop by and see her all the time, and it wasn't the intention to buy the house. I just really enjoyed talking to her and whatnot. And then part of it was a discussion of I knew she was selling some other stuff. I said, hey, for tax purposes, if you don't want to get a huge tax hit on this, we do seller finance, then you can get cash over time. And then you get the steady cash flow. So it more became a discussion of like, hey, how much would you like to be coming in a month? And once she gave me that number, then I kind of just plugged into a mortgage calculator and worked my way backwards to be like, okay, how does this sound for terms? And she's like, yep, that seems realistic. And we kind of looked at what's a high yield savings going for and came up with some good terms for it that way. So it was really just more of like, it was how do we make it a win-win for both of us? And for her, she was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with all this cash anyways. And for me, it was like, hey, I'd rather work with you and give you the interest than a random bank the interest.
All right, so just finish us off. We already hate your guts. Just go ahead and tell us what's the interest rate you're paying and the amortization. Just go ahead and just make me hate you even more.
It was 4.5% for
Ah,
20 years.
For how long?
For 20.
Yeah, you did pretty good on that one.
Taylor, we need to find guests that we feel like we're better than them. And I want you to put it in our notes that we're no longer going to invite these amazing people onto this podcast because you're making me and Chandler look terrible. Like, really, Alex?
I have thought about your 5-10-10 thing, but this
And
one worked out that if I can extend it, I will.
You
he's
killed.
only been here for what, 11 months? And he's doing this all in 11 months.
First, he gives her 100 grand or whatever the amount was, and then she gives it back plus more, and then she finances it for 20 years at 4.5% and thanks him for it. Probably she was probably like, "Thank you so much, Alex," and he's like, "No, no, thank you."
I would like to think it's a win-win. All right.
It is a
Yeah.
win-win. I'm so
And,
jealous. Like, I just hate your guts because I'm so jealous.
well, I think it's funny too because in reality, like, which of my loans has the least amount of likely recourse will probably be her loan, but which loan am I going to make sure is paid before any other ones? Like, screw the bank. Like, whatever. I'm gonna make sure she gets her money because I just care about that woman and make sure she gets what she needs. So if I go bankrupt and everything else, I'm still gonna pay her mortgage one way or another. You know.
Yeah. She's nice. I need to meet her.
I'm gonna
That's
keep a couple cards close to my chest. All right.
No, we won't.
that's
I'd
really
keep her to herself for sure.
Yeah.
So,
wow. And so now
wow.
when
I
people
did
tell you,
not
oh, there
expect
aren't any
that.
deals, interest rates are too high, you just roll your eyes and go, yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind
It might
of
be a one in a million, so we'll see.
I want to talk about the hard money process for you. Like, how was that? Can you say who you used or?
Or give us how many points did you pay going in and out? Yeah, give us the
Yeah.
details. You don't have to tell us how much you borrowed, but we'd love to know exactly their terms if you don't care.
So this would have been in July that I borrowed it. I borrowed it was 12% interest and 3 points. And I ended up doing just the acquisition cost of it because I had a family member that was kind of interested in getting in real estate. So he lent me the rehab funds because I also just because of my experience flipping, I didn't want to deal with doing draw payments and whatnot. And this was a house that was like, it didn't really need to pull any permits technically, but like I didn't want some inspector to get in there from some company be like, oh, well, you need to get a permit pull on this and be like, dude, I do not need to pull a permit on this. Like it's very simple stuff. And so that's what I was like, if I can control at least the rehab funds, so I don't have to pay a fee for someone and wait for them to come out there, it'd be much better. So then it became just a discussion with my family. I'm like, hey, can you transfer me another chunk of money? And that just made it a lot easier. And then I was able to pay him off everything. He made a little bit of interest, but yeah, so it was pretty good. But then when I called that same guy back to borrow for another house I was looking at, he was up to like 4 points and 12% interest.
Okay, so I want to clarify for the listener, Alex. Tell me if I'm crazy. So you paid 12% interest. Was it did you pay interest only throughout or did you pay the interest at the end?
No, it was throughout.
Throughout every month you paid him interest. And then when you say you paid 3 points, that would be 3 percentage points, okay?
Mhm.
So let's say it was $100,000. That's $3,000. And then did you pay the points up front and then you had to pay interest on them the whole time?
Yep, I paid the points up front. It was interest over time, but I only had the money out for like 35 days. So I
Yes.
mean, I paid way more in points. So his IRR was awesome.
Right.
But
Right.
it got me into the deal. So I was like, yeah, that's annoying. But I was going to remind myself, okay, at the end of the day, I still ended up with over 25% equity in the deal for it. So it's like, yeah, I paid $5,000 worth of interest for a month essentially, but I got the deal. So who cares?
And then
Well,
did your hard money lender, I'm sorry, Chandler, I love all these details. Did your hard money lender charge you any points to close out the loan or no?
No.
Okay, because some very frequently I see it where they charge 2% or 2 points to take the money out, and then they charge you another 2% to pay them back.
mhm.
So that's actually a fairly decent deal what you had there, in my opinion. So anyway, sorry, Chandler.
Yeah.
No, I was saying it was off market too. So you kind of, there was an agent involved. That's probably what you would have paid them. So
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
of,
Yeah, it was all off market.
so wow, that's awesome though. I didn't expect that to come out. Oh, hard money back to seller finance. So, and you said you're living in that one now.
Yep. Yeah, that's now become my primary residence.
Okay. Do you plan on staying there or what's kind of next?
For now, because I like the fact that it's not on my debt to income ratio. So when I go to apply for another mortgage, it'll look like I'm living rent free or whatever. Essentially,
Yeah.
because my other mortgage will be covered by the leases I have. But I'd like to buy a new one. This house is nice, but I'd like a house with a little bit bigger yard and for my dog and everything. So I'm gonna keep looking when the right one pops up, but I'm not in a rush. So again, if I can find another great little ADU house or a duplex or something like that, I mean, ideally a fourplex with a VA loan would be awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be the real dream.
So you
But
still
So,
have money left on your VA, is that right? You can spend
yes, from my
400.
understanding, I can.
Wow.
The only thing that's interesting about the VA loan is after you use it your first time, like your first time, if you put 0% down, it's like, don't quote me these numbers, but it's like 1.3% or something is the funding fee. But once you've used it once, your second time using it, you put 0% down, it ends up being like a 3% fee. And yes, you can wrap that in your mortgage, but that means you're starting your mortgage at 103% of loan to value. Versus if you put 5% down, then you're only paying like a 1% fee or something. And so it's like, all right, at least I'm at 95% loan to value. Yeah, I got to come up with 5%. But I just don't like being, even with this one, buying at 100%, like I just didn't like being at that loan to value where I was off. So I pay a little bit extra because I want to have some buffer room in there. I don't like being that close loan to value that if I go to sell it for whatever reason, I'm underwater. Like that's not a good place to be in my head.
So with your VA loan, I just want to make sure I understand. This is so important. As agents, Chandler, and I need to understand this too. But if you have a cap of 400,000 on your VA, and let's say your first loan was 200, or your first house was 200,000, you would have 200,000 left to spend on your second home, and you would need to move into that home to get the VA loan. But that's what you're saying is that you're not capped, so you can take on a second or third property until you hit that cap. Did I say it correctly?
I honestly, I'm the whole how it works. My understanding is that they've come off a cap, and it's more based on how much you make. But I honestly don't know enough about it. This is getting deep into the lender stuff, where I have good lenders I rely on for that kind of stuff. My point just being that after I've used it once, if I got to put a 5% down anyways, I might as well just look at conventional too and have less restrictions and hoops I need to jump through for it. So, the first time home buying for a VA person, great way to use it. I'd buy the biggest freaking house I could with it, put 0% down if I in that case. But after that first time, it's like you can put less down with the FHA potentially and have less, not be in a worse spot like that. You might get a little better rate with the VA loan, but that whole like having that whole funding fee really adds a lot of costs people don't think about that could wrap in an extra 3% on the cost of your home.
Feels like you need to whoever you or the veteran would need to do the math. It
Mhm.
really would depend on the condition of the home, because if the home needs a good bit of work, it's probably not going to pass a VA inspection or an FHA inspection. So you're going to have to buy something close to turnkey, and that again is going to up your purchase price. So that's another calculation that you have to take in. But how wonderful for you that you have that option. Like a lot of people don't have that.
It's great. I mean, I've had a lot of guys. One of my favorite things to do when I was in basic training, because I went through at 30, I had a lot of young guys. So I spent a lot of time talking about just finance stuff. And my strategy was like, hey, be that guy who goes and buys the house, buy a house with the most amount of bedrooms you can. Because, if you buy a 3-bed, 2-bath, it's generally not that much less than buying a 4-bed, 2-bath. But you got an extra room you can rent out for an extra $700, and then you can be living for free. So buy that house and get all your buddies to live in the house with you and live for free and just let them pay off your mortgage, and you're keeping all your BAH in your pocket while they pay everything off. And be that guy than the guy who's going to keep renting and renting and renting from base to
Yeah.
base, and you just blow all your BAH rather than being done with the military after 20 years and having 6 or 7 rental properties all over the nation, plus your full pension and probably some disability pay as well.
So, holy cow, I have a ton of questions, and I'm forgetting them right now. So, what was the first one I was going to ask? So, has the bank given you any issues, as in getting other one like you have one in Colorado? Did you have to restructure that, or is that one still on the conventional?
It's unconventional.
And then VA loans next.
Mhm.
Now you're seller finance.
And he did
Finance.
live in the second one, which qualify, that's he doesn't have to stay there forever. He just has to live in
Yeah.
it or buys it. So the next one, you'll probably move again, which you want to move.
Yep. I mean, I hate the act of moving, but I'm just like, suck it up for 2 weeks and move and just think about the long-term plan here. I mean, I moved across the street and it drove me insane having to move across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned, Alex, that the lady had other properties. So have you been talking to your best friend and neighbor about purchasing other properties from her? Because that's always a great way to get additional real estate, is to ask the investor, what else do you have? Have you asked her that question yet?
Oh, I've asked her that question. Unfortunately, this was literally the last house she had. She
Man,
had had
Oh,
like 30 at one point and sold them all off. She owned almost my entire street at one point.
wow.
get out of here.
You're telling me, I was just like, when I found out, I was like, no, I had such a good
Look,
thing
we'll wait.
going. I mean, I still got one. I'm very thankful for it, but man, I would have been like one at a time, just helping her sell them all off. And, you know,
Wow. So what's next? You said you have another one coming up, right?
yeah, I mean, most of what I've been trying to do is I've been helping a couple people with project management, helping some other investors right now work on projects just because my background being project management, we had a pretty good strategy going. I feel like, there's plenty of great flippers out there, but I feel like what we were doing operationally, we were really running at our peak. We were doing a very good job of running the projects. And I feel like that's a common problem with people in flipping is to start scaling too quickly and the operations falls apart and they contract, things aren't getting done. There's delays in projects. Things are getting done incorrectly. They just don't have the level of operational efficiency and just discipline around it. And so I've been doing a little bit of that work on the side where I kind of have been helping people project manage their projects and just deal with the contractors and hopefully the process kind of teaching them because I also just enjoy teaching it. But on the other side of it, more for me, my cousin who I partnered with on the last house, he wants to get into more of these. And so we just found another house. We just got our contract actually yesterday, buying it through a probate court, technically. It's on the market, buying it from a probate court, though. So it's got a long close. But the interesting thing about it was I want to be closer to Daffin Park. I like to go there and run with my dog. So my goal is to get me moved over there so I could in the morning get up and I could run around the park and run back and get my dog some exercise. And I found this house that I initially was going to buy as a primary, but then I said, this might make a good investment as me and him are trying to test out how does it look to kind of start jointly buying these things. And this house was interesting because it's a 3-bed, 2-bath house, but it's kind of subdivided inside. There was a door from the kitchen to what was clearly an addition to the house that has been swapped out for like a little like kind of panel wall. And so now it's built as like a 2-1 and a 1-1. And so if you look at the difference in the rental comps of a 3-2, which puts you at about $2,300 a month, versus a 1-1 you can maybe get 1,200 for, and a 2-1 you can maybe get 1,600 for. Now you're bringing in $2,800 a month, which then makes that property cash flow very nicely. And so that's our kind of goal with this one. I think we got it decently under market too, so I'm happy we landed on it. And so that's kind of my goal now is I got this one, it's kind of a proof of concept, and that's to start trying to look to other houses or start trying to scale up and trying to get to some small multifamily. He's really bullish on one too. His background is putting together funds, so he wants to put together a fund to start bringing people in. And I was like, all right, well, let's take it one step at a time and kind of slow walk it to build out our strategy and make sure we're right about it. So that's kind of where I'm starting to go with it now is just looking to move into more things and kind of take more of that private equity model where I get a carry for helping structure the deal and based on people's returns, how much I get of ownership of the deal.
So Alex, just to back it up on this deal near Daffin Park. So you're telling us it's a legal single family, but it's already been parceled into a kind of a what you would call an illegal duplex. And as the owner, you can rent it as however many units you want. Is that correct? It's a single family home that you're going to use as a duplex.
Exactly.
Smart. Chandler and I work with another investor and he does this very successfully. And I mean extremely well. He's really good. He's never seen a 4-2. He can't make into a 2-2 or a 2-1 and a 2-1 or a 3-1 and a 1-1. And yeah.
Yeah, the only tricky thing I figure is like I think resale, it's a little bit of a quirky house. So that's something I'm keeping in mind too. Like, hey, maybe I'm not going to top out the 3-2 market when I go to resale, but in the meantime, if I can get that cash flow and just ride due to proximity to Daffin Park and let that whole area continue to come up, then I think in the long term it's still going to do well. Or maybe just hold it long term, or someone who's seen the same way we're seeing it. Like it'd be a great house for someone's just getting started doing exactly what I did. Of hey, I can live in part of it and I can rent out the other part and cover a good chunk of my mortgage, and that can help a lot of people get started.
If I were your agent, and I'm not, but if I were your agent and you were going to sell this right now and it was already, rented and rehabbed and all that, my advice to you is we can only sell it as a legal 3-2, but we can put in the comments what you're doing with it and the rental income, and we're going to really target investors that are going to buy it. They'll see the value in that. So you're absolutely right in that a home buyer would probably not be as interested, but an investor would be extremely interested. So it would comp typically higher than a standard 3-2, but lower than a legal duplex. That's my real estate advice for you on that. I know you're not trying to sell it. You haven't even bought it yet, but for the long game, all is not lost.
For sure.
And one thing that I want to point out is like you're creating opportunity. You're not just like, oh, it's a 3-2, it doesn't work. You're looking at things and going, okay, this is a 3-2, but I can do this. And I feel like in today's market, it's kind of like what you have to do. You just kind of have to go create that opportunity, and you're like really good at seeing those kind of things, which I know a lot of people, I'm like, dude, do you not see this, how you can split it up? And they're like, no, I don't see it at all. And some people just can't see that. And it sounds like you're really good at doing that.
Well,
Yeah, I was very fortunate that my kind of mentor who I work for, like he was very good at it. So just from walking really hundreds of houses with him, I may got an engineering background, a little bit of construction, so I'm pretty good. Like, oh, that's not. We can just move the wall here. But you're right. I did that. I walked through with my cousin, and we were talking about his house was all sorts of weird. I was like, oh, we can put the hallway here and that. And he was like, I just can't see that. Like, I don't know how you can see it. And it's just different skill sets people have, but. If you can learn to see the opportunity in it, that's where you can make a lot of money, especially for people who don't have a ton of money to get started. Again, 5% down is really the barrier to entry. I mean, an FHA or even now, apparently there's like 1% down now options. So you don't necessarily need to have a VA loan. But those are things I like to look for. And I think that's the best way to start especially if you're a single person with one income, trying to find ways my mindset is always like, how can I live for free? That's always my question. How can I not have to pay money for rent? It's my biggest expense. How can I have somebody else pay it for me?
well, Alex, I want to compliment you. You're not only good at seeing the creativity in the deal and the cash flow, you're good at taking action, and you go after what you want. And that's a really good skill. A lot of people have that analysis paralysis. And I have to call out my own husband. He's the same way. And I literally told him 2 weeks ago, because he's been lamenting this advice he gave Chandler like a month and a half ago. Why didn't I take action on what I said? And I said, from now on, if you're going to tell him something, you need to take action on it, even if it's a small thing. And he's done the same thing. He struggles with action, but really good knowledge base. But you've got both, and I think that's huge.
I appreciate it. Well, he's lucky he's got a good support system for you to kind of give him a little push.
Right. I'm all action, no preparation, and he's all preparation, no action. So
I think real estate is that classic thing. Real estate and entrepreneurship are the two things that it's just so easy to get caught in analysis paralysis. And that's why it's like, I think buying houses like that, like with an ADU or something, that's the easiest place to start. Because you need a home anyways, you need a place to live. There's always people who are going to be like, oh, well, it's not the right time to buy. It's like I saw something from Barbara Corcoran, and she was talking about, she was like, oh, everyone thinks I'm so smart. She's like, I just bought New York real estate overpriced in the 1970s. Now everyone thinks I'm a genius. That's just the nice thing about real estate is like, eventually you'll be right. Or it's all going to collapse anyways. We're in trouble then anyway. So
as an investor myself, when I moved from commercial to single family, I spent over a year, probably a year and a half in analysis paralysis. And I got so mad, and I knew this market so well that's when I kind of flipped and I went a little nutty. But I did the same. Like even though I'm quite fast now, I wanted people to know, 15 years ago, I was like, and I mean, I started my investing in Richmond Hill, which has really skyrocketed. And I can't tell you how many deals I passed up in Richmond Hill that now I'm just like, so
that's where everyone from my base lives. So it's a good area. Great schools too. That's like a huge piece.
That's the big thing.
Yeah.
I want to ask, you mentioned kind of like raising money from your family. How do you like pitch that? Like, how do you get them comfortable with giving you money or anybody giving you money?
Um, I mean, it's still very new to me, but I think one of the biggest shifts in it was, again, I go back to I had a really good mentor that I worked for, and I always kind of had that idea too. If I'm asking someone for money for raising money for someone, I'm asking them for money, and he always like, no, I'm not asking them for money. I'm giving them an opportunity to invest. He's like, I keep a spreadsheet of everyone I've raised money from and what I've made them in returns, just like for his own tracking too, of like, all right, his father-in-law or whoever else has gotten into it. So I think that's the biggest thing is flipping that mindset of saying, I'm not asking for money. I'm giving you an opportunity to invest. They invest every day in the stock market and they give their money to a company. Don't think twice about it.
Yeah.
I think to me, it's more of just I really want to make sure I'm doing good due diligence and I'm getting into it because in a lot of these cases, I'm kind of a subject matter expert, which is a bit scary because I'm like, wow, if I'm going to go ask my dad for some money, like, I do not want to lose my dad's money, like, or whoever
Yeah.
else or family members. Like, I care about it even more because it's someone that I'm close to. So it definitely gives me a little bit of pause and like, a little bit of concern in it and being smart about it. But again, it's just really flip that mindset of like I'm giving you an opportunity to invest, but I never sugarcoat the risk in it too. It's like, hey, yes, this is real estate, it's backed by an asset, but like it could all fall, be a hell in a handbasket overnight. Stuff happens, and hopefully we mitigate a lot of those risks. But there is risk here, and so I really try to just go through all the bad things that could happen. Hey, we get in this house and find out that the foundation is completely screwed up. We think we know it's good, but maybe it's not. Maybe the sewer line is way worse than we thought. Or we rip them walls and we find stuff we don't like, and the price really goes up. But my mindset is always like, I would rather take a loss than not get an investor back their money in that case. And so you got to kind of put yourself on the chopping block first to make sure that you're like, I will sacrifice everything to make sure they get their money back, not only to protect my reputation, but to protect their investment and opportunity I gave them.
Okay.
Alex, are you comfortable telling us what terms you're offering family for private money borrowing?
So I've only done it one time, and it was really just a tester. So it was just a 10% interest, interest only. There wasn't any points on it, but it was for like 50 grand, so it wasn't very much. In this new deal we're doing, it's gonna be a bit different, where it's more of he's coming to the table with 90% of the down payment. I'm putting in 10%, and then I'm getting a carry on it. So it's like an 8% preferred return. And then from there, it ramps up how much I get based on the IRR, levered IRR, I think it is. And this is into a whole new world of finance that I've really had to learn that
Mhm.
my cousin was really good at. So he's been teaching me it. Excuse me, but having to learn how you actually do these big deals when you're kind of being the GP versus the LP situation, general partner versus the limited partners, and how bigger real estate deals are structured. So I'm starting to learn that, and we're putting it to use in smaller cases to test it out before we start ramping up into bigger stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me clarify on this one. So he's guaranteed 9% on his money. So if he gives you 100,000, he's guaranteed 9,000. Is it annualized or is it simple?
It's annualized.
Okay, so if you borrow the 100,000 for half of a year, you'd only owe him 4,500 since it's 9% over 6 months. Is that right?
I believe so. I got to look at
Okay.
the terms.
But then you're incentivized when you say the higher the IRR and the lower the expenses, higher the internal rate of return. So if you can make a higher rate of return than what he's banking on, you'll get more of the deal. Is that right? So you're more incentivized to get lower pricing on tile or do some of the work yourself because that juices what you make.
Yep, and getting his cash back to him. So it's really based on how quickly he gets his cash back in the process. So
It's speed
the sooner
and
I can get his cash out and he gets it back, the better return he gets on his cash over time, and that's what's going to get me more. So it's like a waterfall of like it starts with like the preferred return, and then it trickles down from there. So then if the IRR goes from like I think some like whatever that is 8% to 20%, I get a certain chunk, and then if it goes from 20 to 30, I get a bigger chunk, and so it's almost like taxes where it's tiered out that as it goes up, I get a bigger and bigger piece of it.
that's great. That's incentive right there.
Yeah, exactly. That's the good thing about it because I want to make sure I put a little bit of cash in the deal because I don't like being completely on them. But that's the incentive is like, hey, I only make money if it does well for him, which is a good driver for me. And it makes it worth his time too. Because then all he's going to do is put his money in and just, he knows I'm motivated to get him the best return possible because that's how I get money in the deal. Otherwise, I don't really 10% on a single family home deal is not, on cash loans, maybe $50 a month. That does nothing for me. But
Yeah.
getting at 40, 50% of the return, then we start to talk, especially when you look at appreciation over 10 years, that could turn into a really big chunk of change.
And then you're going to sell it or refinance it.
We're going to refinance it and keep it. This one really doesn't need much work, so it's more just going to get it onto a loan and just start renting it out and just ride it.
Nice.
And how'd you find that deal?
It was just on the MLS. I just was poking around on the MLS, looking over by Daphne I wanted to be, and I found it. Started clicking through, same thing, just being able to see, being able to kind of picture. I was like, hey, I just saw the extra kitchen, and that's what kind of triggered me to say,
Yeah.
okay, an extra kitchen here, something else was going on. And then just kind of having a piece together, looked on county records at the layout, the general shape of the house. I was like, oh, there's kind of an addition back here, so that must be what this is. And then once I kind of had enough idea that was worth my time, then I went and saw it. I was like, okay, this one looks good. So I mean, I was so used to when we were flipping a lot, we were just firing off contracts. We weren't even looking at houses until we got them under contract. And then once we got them under contract, then we'd go walk them, make sure it was what we thought, do a more in-depth budget. Then we put down the earnest money, or we just immediately terminate and just be like, hey, sorry, not we didn't want it, don't even change it to contingent.
That's very efficient. And you said you're not doing that anymore?
No, I just don't have the scale right now for that. That was when, we had a huge line of credit we were going off when we were running, 5, 6 projects at a time. So there was like an acquisition manager, and then I was the project manager. And so she was find them, she'd get them under contract, she'd kick them to me, and then I'd go look at them and kind of do a whole quick budget for it and be like, yep, it's looking like this cost, bring back the numbers, get together with my boss and say, hey, do we want to keep it? Or do we want to wholesale it, or do we just want to let it go?
Well, it's interesting that you're saying this because I have a lot of clients that they want to know every penny of the rehab budget before they write a contract on a house. And I keep saying, there's no way. You're always going to find something, but like I'm going to send this episode out maybe because I'm always like, get it under contract at your number with overestimating your rehab. Get it under contract. If you get it under contract, now put the time and money into getting those quotes. What would your answer be to that, Alex?
I mean, I always start with, I mean, one key thing I think a lot of people miss is I always do sewer scopes. People tend to miss that a lot, and that could be a huge ticket item if you don't catch that. It's funny because here in Savannah, like I had to call multiple different plumbers to get a sewer scope, and I had to pay an arm and a leg for it. In Denver, everyone did sewer scopes, and it was like $99 to get a sewer scope done. But I would focus more on start with the big ticket items. We call them like the major systems. So the roof, the windows, the sewer line, the electrical panel, the HVAC, your hot water heater, like those right there, most of the time end up being at least half the cost of your rehab alone.
Yeah.
If you have those ones. The foundation obviously is the other really big one there too. Almost all those things you can see. You can go look at the furnace and say, does it look old or does it look pretty new? There's a date in the hot water heater. You can look at it and see how old it is. The AC, and again, you just look at it, see how old it is. I mean, you can turn up the heat and turn on the AC. Does it blow cold? Okay, it's a pretty good indicator. It probably works. You're not going to know everything, but you can make a lot of quick assessments that way. The panel, is it at least 150 amps or 200 amps? Is it not a stab lock or one of the ones you got to be concerned about catching fire, and it's not any sort of knob and tube? The roof, is it if it's a, what's it called, a 3-tab roof? Does it look beaten up, or you see ones lift off? You see any sagging in the roof? Start looking at it, and then just walk around the foundation. Is there cracks in the brick? Do you see anything? Notice anything unlevel? If you're unsure, bring a little marble with you and set down on the floor. And if it starts rolling direction, then go to that corner of the house and say, all right, am I seeing anything on the outside? And then come to the inside and be like, what am I seeing here? Because if I see cracks on the outside, I'm going to come to the inside of the house and look at that same spot and see if I'm seeing cracks through the drywall. Well, that's houses are lacking plaster, so you're really going to see it then. You start figuring out, okay, something's going on this corner here. Look up, okay, there's no gutters. The ground's kind of beaten up. It's probably been draining a bunch here, so the ground's getting soft here. You can figure out a lot of stuff there. And then after that, like, yeah, there's things you're not going to know until you open walls, but you can kind of look and be like, okay, we got to do a full kitchen, a full bath. Kitchens to cost me what, 15 grand. A bathroom's going to cost me 5 grand. You can build a rehab budget pretty quick, and then just throw a contingency on there and be like, hey, normally I do 10%, but if I'm really unsure, I might add 15%. I'd rather add in more stuff and then be able to take it off, and work my way backwards that way. But yeah, I always start with the major systems because those bigger ticket items, those are generally ones that get a lot of people who are new because they're looking at all the, HGTV stuff of making the kitchen pretty. They're not expecting the fact that when they go to sell the house, the person tests the furnace, it doesn't work, and all of a sudden they got an 8 grand thing they weren't expecting. That blows the whole deal up and eats up all their margin.
That was really good that you got that job with your buddy in Denver. I bet that taught you so much before getting into.
So much.
Yeah. Because I feel like that's one thing is like, I'm like, man, I just wish I knew everything like kitchen wise, like how much it would cost me to do a kitchen, I do know now, but it's always nice just being able to know like what you know, which is way more to me. about all that kind of stuff.
Well, I want to get in on this. I have zero info. I've never worked in construction. I've painted a lot. I mean, I'm decently handy, but I have no construction background. But I can walk a house, which I do all the time for my clients and for myself. I can tell you if they're just like what you said, Alex. I can walk in the door and know 80% of the stuff you just said. If I look at the water heater and it's extremely old and I can't find a date on it, I'm just going to mentally go, okay, I'm going to plan on that. I can look at a roof and say, yeah, I'm probably going to need you know what I mean? Like even someone like myself can say a lot of those things that you just said. Anyone can put a marble on the floor, but yeah, a lot of times you can feel those soft spots. And I was just in one last week on West 39th and I was like, okay, there's a soft spot right here between the kitchen and dining room. The rest of the house is solid. Is that going to cost a couple grand? Yes. But like, I don't need to pay an inspector to know those basic things. And like you said, they're the most expensive things. I'm always going to need paint and floors. I'm almost always going to need a new kitchen and bathroom. I spend a little more on my kitchens and bathrooms than you do. So I need to probably move down on that. But a roof is 6,000. I always bank on that. A water heater. What would you say a water heater is 1,000? Between 1,000 and 2,000?
Yeah, I'd say like 1,500 because normally they're about $750 and most people charge $750. And
Yeah.
I'll give you one of my little hacks for hot water heaters that we used to do. If we knew a house needed a hot water heater, we would put in the budget, but we wouldn't do it right away. And we get the house under contract to sell, and we knew they're gonna bring up an inspection. And so normally what happened is we would already plan to do a hot water heater. They'd be like, we want a new hot water heater, and we want this 10 other little things. We're like, we don't want to do all the 10 other things. We'll do a new hot water heater for you. And by giving that big ticket item, they felt like they really got something good out of the deal. We had already planned in our budget, so we already planned to do is we just shifted the timeline of it. And the buyer felt like they really won. They got a new hot water heater, and they're like, yeah, we stuck it to them. And we're like, cool, everyone won. We didn't have to do a bunch of other BS, or there was something else that was going to be way too big. It's like, hey, we can't do that, but we'll give you this. And a lot of people would really like that. It was an easy way to kind of make the inspection go a little bit smoother, and then everyone still won in the end.
When I do buy and hold, I don't flip. So I'll budget exactly what you're saying. I'm going to budget for a water heater. I'm going to budget for a roof. Maybe I budget for an HVAC. But if it ain't broke, I don't fix it. So I may budget for it, but if I don't have to put it in and it can wait a couple of years, I am going to absolutely get a tenant in, cash flow, and it's okay. I'm totally fine with replacing the HVAC 2 to 3 years later. Now I've saved all that money. And I knew I was going to have to do it. Just like you said, you know it's coming, but why change it if it's working appropriately if it's just old? Like an old roof that's not leaking, I would not replace. But I'm going to know I'm going to have to, and I'm not going to get upset when I do.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna try and get money off of the inspection when I buy it for it.
Oh, of course, of
The
course.
world is ending if I don't get this done. But you don't need to fix it. I'd rather just have the cash. I will fix it myself. Just give me the 8 grand concession, and then when it actually dies on me, I'll replace it.
Exactly.
Super smart. So I want to ask, are you still in the military?
I am. I'm active duty right now, but I'm in the process of transition to the Air Guard, so I can go part time.
Okay.
So I get the health insurance and everything, and then I'm gonna kind of take it from there.
Okay. So from there, I just want to say, like, what recommendations would you give to people that are in the military? Like, what's the first thing? I don't know. You said you would buy a bigger house. Like, what's some steps that you would tell military people to like buy first and then scale as well, and how to scale?
Well, I think for a lot of it really kind of depends your age too. One of
Yeah.
my big things when I was in basic training was talking to guys who are 18 or 19. I was like, hey, when we get out of here, like get a credit card and just put like $10 a month on it and pay it off. Like start very basic.
Hmm.
You're not gonna be able to buy anything to do some credit. If you're past that point of having some credit, you're putting some money in your TSP and everything else. A lot of guys are stuck on base for a while. They got to live on base. I was pretty fortunate just because of my job. They never made me live on base, so I got BAH. But if you're going to buy something, I would really be looking for what I've been talking about. Those kind of those quirky houses where you can split it up, or again, like I said, the more bedrooms, the better. So if you can buy a house, especially close to base, that's 4 bedrooms, and you rent out, and you already know 3 or 4 buddies that will rent from you, then perfect. You got a good place to start there. Or if you really want to be more conservative, to start when you move off base, rent a house first. Make sure you guys all got it going. Then say, hey guys, I'm going to buy a house. Would you guys want to move in and kind of get some guys locked into that agreement, and then
Yeah.
go find a house to buy it, and start there and work your way up. And again, live in the smallest bedroom, rent out the master bedroom separately, do room by room rather than renting the whole thing out if you can. Um, I was always pretty nice to my roommates, and I was like, hey, I just charge them half their BAH plus utilities. I felt like that was pretty realistic, so they got to still keep cash in their pockets. But for the most part, with most BAHs, if you charge someone half the BAH, which is your basic housing allowance, if you charge them half and you had 3 bedrooms, that should probably be pretty darn close to covering your mortgage. Or sorry, if you have 4 bedrooms, you had 3 roommates, you should be bringing in enough to probably come close to covering that mortgage where you're spending 200-300 bucks a month to live, plus your share of utilities. And I'll just keep rinse repeating, living in for a year or two and buy another one. And as you keep working your way up, when you get a family, it might be a little bit different, but especially if you're single, like,
Yeah.
I'd take the risk and move every year and buy another house. And then when you move to another base somewhere else and rent these houses out and just keep holding on to them, because you're always going to have a demand about military bases. And the nice thing about military people is if I was to rent from anyone who I didn't know who's in the military, I'd always get, their commanding officer's information, their first sergeant's information, and make it very clear if they have any issues, like, that's immediately who I'm going to go to. Is I'm going to start with them and go right up the top of the food chain and be like, hey, this person is not paying their rent, and the hammer will come down on them real hard.
That's smart to know their housing and then charge them half because then they really want to stay in your house. I bet people were fighting to stay with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, you can go online, you can look up anyone's BAH rate. You can look at their rank and you can just type in the zip code of the base and it'll tell you exactly what it is. Most time around the bases, you'll kind of see the similar rent because all the rent is based on the BAH. You can only go so high because it's capped based on, you don't have people coming in from outside jobs making 200K. It's mostly going to be, maybe NCOs that are E5s, E6s, and you can look at what their BAH is for their rank and having dependents. You can have a good idea of what you can charge for a family versus if you went room by room to more younger single people.
That's great.
Super smart, super smart. So Alex, where can people find you? I know a ton of people gonna have a ton of questions.
For sure. I feel like Instagram is the easiest. Mine is A_Chiappetta, spelled CHIAPETTA. Or feel free to email me. It's chiappetta.alex@gmail.com.
Cool.
We'll
I think
in the show notes too.
yeah, perfect. But yeah, no, super cool story. We had just met last month, so we talked briefly and I didn't know you had all this going on, so super cool.
Yeah, Alex, you're amazing. You've done a lot with, a little. And I mean that as the biggest compliment possible. Like you didn't come in with $1 million, and you've made it work. And as soon as I met you, I was like, this guy is really smart. I need to talk to him more. But it's hard sometimes at the meetups, it gets a little bit crazy. But thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. And I know our listeners are going to want to reach out to you. And I want to put it out there. The best way to get Alex is to come to our meetup, Cash Flow Savannah. And I know he would love to speak to anyone. Any final thoughts, Alex, for real estate investing?
No, I appreciate you guys having me on here. It's been great meeting you guys. I'm looking forward to working with you. Hopefully we find a deal to do together. Other than that, I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at the next meetup event.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 29. If you like this episode, please share with anyone that you know. We deeply appreciate it. And we will see you in the next episode.
Take care.